Can I just say one thing firstly? I love the name Eat Sleep Boxing Repeat.
Welcome back to another edition of ESBR Boxing's Big Fight Breakdown. I'm Thomas here with Niall and Danny, and today we'll be discussing Gervonta Davis's March 1st return to the ring against Lamont Roach, which will be taking place at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn for Gervonta Davis's WBA title. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, interact with our content any way you can across all of our platforms. That would be greatly appreciated. So we're not too far out from Davis's return now. Um, I gotta admit, when this fight was first announced, I wasn't too excited about it upon first hearing, but I've watched a little bit more of Lamont Roach lately, and I'm like, maybe this isn't. I'm not saying that he's gonna win or that he has a big chance to win, but I'm like, maybe this isn't as bad of a matchup as people who aren't as familiar with Roach might think. But anyways, just before we start actually breaking down the matchup or breaking down the fight and keys to victory and seeing what Roach has to do to win, Niall, I'll start with you. Just quick thoughts on the matchup. What do you think on it?
I'm like you. When it got announced, I'm not a huge fan of the fight, to be honest with you. And it's not without trying to sound disrespectful to Lamont Roach. Lamont Roach, I think, is a really good fighter. I think stylistically, he's a very nice fighter to watch. But what it comes down to is it's another asterisk against Gervonta Davis that it's a super featherweight coming up. Coming up to 135. It's a constant theme of Davis's career now. There's people coming up. We've seen it with Garcia coming up to 135, good fighter, but not proven lightweight. Leo Santa Cruz coming up two weight divisions. Yeah, it's getting ridiculous now for our fighters as talented as Gervonta Davis to keep kind of, I hate to use the word, but cherry pick these type of opponents. Lamont Roach is a good fighter, as I say. But if it was at 130, it'd be a better fighter if Lamont Roach was a natural 135er. But it's that sours it for me, to be honest with you. Taking nothing away from Lamont Roach, but he's not a proven lightweight. So yeah, I wasn't a big fan of this fight personally when it got announced anyway.
Yeah, that's another thing that I forgot to mention before we got into it is that Lamont Roach actually is a WBA title holder at 130 pounds. So yeah, not a natural lightweight going in. So that's another reason why, this fight, isn't really, yeah, is honestly kind of a cherry pick. I don't think anybody was really asking for it. Um, Danny, what do you think? What are your thoughts? Do you agree or do you think differently?
Yeah, I agree with the vast majority of what Niall said there. I mean, I'm looking forward to it in that it's one of the biggest stars in boxing back in the ring, although as well as the underwhelming opponents, the cherry picking, as you rightly say, the constant sort of bullying, financial bullying, which a lot we've seen so many A-side fighters do in the past. It's a common theme in boxing. Staying activity as well. It's well, he said 2 fights in 2 years. I know he had his outside of the ring issues, so we say, but that's still it still doesn't that's his fault, that's his responsibility that he's involved in this. But I'm looking forward to seeing him back in action. He's talent wise one of the best fighters in the sport, one of the most exciting fighters in the sport. Lamont Roach, in terms of opponents, he's a talented fighter. He's technically good. I don't see him causing Tank too many issues, I have to say. But looking forward to seeing Tank back in the ring. So maybe ended on a positive.
Okay. So obviously it seems we don't really feel too high about Lamont Roach's chances here. One thing worth mentioning too, they did kind of come up. They're the same age. They came up in the amateurs together. They fought a couple times, I believe. Gervonta won both of them. So I don't want to read too much into that, but I think like the theme there is Gervonta has always been the obviously the one who's more talented. His learning curve is more has accelerated further, and his physical talent is much better. Obviously, he's a much bigger puncher. So I don't really see what has changed in the meantime for Lamont Roach to be able to, you know, prove differently. But what would be if there were one, what would be the path to victory for Roach? I do think that Davis tends to fall in love with his power a little bit and can be quite inactive. So, Danny, I'll come back to you here. Do you think that there's any chance that Roach could have any success taking advantage of that early on?
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see him win a couple of the early rounds, but in terms of a path to victory, it's incredibly difficult. I mean, without stating the obvious, it's a massive ask. It depends what sort of approach Davis adopts, and even then, I think that just sort of decides how long the fight will go. If Davis sets about him the way he did Frank Martin, I think he'll destroy him in the first half of the fight. If it's the more sort of patient Davis we see, I think Roach could win some rounds there, go longer then. You know, if you're up in the cards after 7, 8, 9 rounds, you've always got a chance. But watching Lamont Roach, I mean, he's a well-schooled boxer. He does telegraph quite a lot of his punches, and he doesn't have feet that is quicker as a Frank Martin, who I thought boxed actually like pretty brilliantly in the first half of that fight. Anyway, I don't think Roach is as fleet-footed as that. So I think keys to victory, establish the jab. If Davis does adopt a more aggressive approach, get his respect, hit him with something early, sit down in a shot and try and tag him and make him think twice about rushing in. Because if that is the game plan Davis takes and you don't, give him food for thought about coming in, wouldn't be pretty.
Yeah, absolutely. That was another thing that I was gonna just mention after you were talking as well. That I was watching Gervonta's last fight against Frank Martin, and Frank Martin was boxing a brilliant fight through the first 4 rounds. But the problem is you got 8 more after that to go. So yeah, I just wonder myself, and I kind of feel like Frank Martin might be more talented than Lamont Roach is. So, um, can Lamont Roach do any better or differently? Niall, I have a suspicion that you're going to say something along the lines of what we both just said, but anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, it's hard to kind of disagree with what you both said. I've always kind of been of the opinion that to beat Gervonta Davis, I think you need to have kind of size on him. You need to have strength. You need to be able to push him back. And as Danny said, hit him with something that really gets his attention, because we've seen fighters like Frank Martin, Gervonta Davis will lose rounds against fighters with fast feet and quick hands that can box, but they've nothing in their kind of arsenal to keep them off them for 12 rounds. We've seen it against Frank Martin, the composure and the smile on his face, knowing that he was getting outboxed, but that kind of almost calm as if to say, right, I will get you eventually. I will break you down, So I think you need size, strength, push him back, hit him with something big. And Lamont Roach doesn't have that, unfortunately, Lamont Roach, I like the fact that we have seen him have to adapt in fights. He can get on his feet and box on the back foot, quick hands, maybe not as fast as feet as Frank Martin, as Danny says, but he is a good boxer. But we've also seen him having to kind of dig in the pocket and have a bit of a kind of phone booth fight. We've seen it now. The problem is there, the people he's doing that against aren't lightweights and aren't Gervonta Davis. He doesn't have really the power or the size to take it to Davis, like Danny said. He's not a huge puncher even at super featherweight. So I just think his best approach is to kind of get on that back foot, establish the jab, as Danny said, use those quick hands, kind of pot shot and avoid anything huge at all costs. Just play it as kind of, I don't want to say negatively, but as defensively as you can, because if he does try to take it to Davis, he's in trouble in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. You're always walking a tightrope facing Gervonta Davis. It's kind of just a matter of time. Um, so yeah, we'll see how it plays out. But quickly before we get into predictions, um, I just want to know because it seems like Gervonta Davis and his team are content on fighting fights like this for the rest of their career. But if we were to have it our way, um, who what do we want to see Davis do later on this year for his next fight? If we were to choose, like if you ask me, I I want to see them make that Shakur Stevenson fight happen. Um, so now I'll come back to you. What is that fight for you? What is that next step for Davis that you want to see? Do you want to see that next, or is there anything else that you had in mind?
Yeah, it's been such a massively frustrating career for Davis. The talent is there, and undoubtedly, as Danny alluded to earlier, he is one of the most talented fighters in the world, one of the hardest hitting fighters, one of the most exciting fighters to watch. But his career has been very underwhelming, and I know like you have to kind of hand it to him in one way as a businessman. He's kind of maximizing pay, minimizing risk, picking up world titles along the way, across multiple weight divisions. But as boxing fans, we want to see him test himself against the best possible opposition and also to strike while the iron's hot. While there is these big names around like a Shakur Stevenson, like I know they're at 140 now, but Devin Haney, Teofimo Lopez, these type of names. So it has to be one of them names next for me. Even if Vasily Lomachenko, I know he hasn't been in the ring in a while and his career is kind of on a, will he continue or won't he? But I think even Lomachenko would still be a good fight at this stage. But Shakur Stevenson for me, if he gets past Floyd Schofield, obviously, but Shakur Stevenson and Tank Davis is an absolutely fascinating clash of styles against two undefeated superstars, American stars. So if Stevenson gets past Schofield, that's one of the biggest fights in boxing to be made is Shakur Stevenson and Tank Davis, and that's the fight for me. But failing that, a Williams Zepeda even or a Lomachenko would be my next kind of choice at 135.
What about you, Danny? Is Shakur Stevenson the fight that you want to see as well, or is there any other fight that you want to see before that?
I mean, I don't think either of them have what will happen, but I would love to see is now says Shakur or Lomachenko. I think the Lomachenko fight's probably a more entertaining fight, him and Tank Davis, than Shakur versus Tank, but Shakur versus Tank would be a bigger fight and probably a fight with more jeopardy in it for Tank Davis. I don't think either will happen. I mean, Gervonta Davis is very much a man on an island at the minute after Canelo. Canelo was the other one who was sort of holding out from sort of Turkish clutches, and obviously now he's took the knee, and Gervonta Davis and PBC, as you say, Thomas, seem to be happy enough with what they're doing because even though the payday from Turkey and Saudi Arabia would be bigger, he'd have to be in real fights, and there doesn't seem to be any desire to do that. Maybe to try and give a different name that from what Niles mentioned. I was looking at the rankings before this video, and with the WBA, there is no number one contender, and Andy Cruz is actually the highest rated contender. I don't mean there's a fight that's got absolutely no chance of happening. They make the Stevenson and Lomachenko fights look like locked in. Um, I think a fight that's more likely to happen and that wouldn't be awful would be if he was to move up to 140 and fight Valenzuela. Valenzuela obviously got that WBA title up there. He's in the sort of PBC bubble, isn't he? And it's the sort of fight you could see Tank hopping up there, pinching another world title, and then just dropping straight back down. But yeah, sadly, I don't think we'll see any of the fights we really want from Tank Davis.
Yeah, I have I have a suspicion that you're probably right, and especially just hearing interviews from him and LRB and people around him about making those kind of fights happen, and there's just no interest at all. Don't really seem to care. But anyway, it's hard to not look ahead when there's fights like this made, between Davis and Roach. It's really hard to not look past and look into the future.
Yeah.
But no disrespect to Lamont Roach, obviously. So, lastly, let's get into predictions. I I don't see this fight going past round six. I'd say round five or six. Davis gets him out of there a little bit sooner. I'd say it goes similar to the Frank Martin fight. Roach has success early, outboxes him, wins the first few rounds, and I think eventually Davis is going to catch him with something and just put him out of there. Um, Danny, what do you think? What's your prediction for this one?
Yeah, I have a feeling we might sound like a few parrots here. I think my prediction's pretty much identical to yours, Thomas. A few competitive rounds to begin with, and then Davis will catch him, stop him somewhere between, 5 to 7, 8. I think would be the latest I could see it going. Yeah, nothing really much more to say.
Right, Niall, what do you think, man?
Yeah, I'd love to kind of say something different just to mix it up, but I agree absolutely with you both. I think Thomas, you hit the nail on the head saying what I think that it's going to be like Frank Martin, like the Frank Martin fight. As I say, Davis will lose early rounds against decent movers, with fast hands. But I can see him just kind of, I can picture him laughing off the work of Lamont Roach early on, and then getting him out there. Yeah, but if it goes more than 6 rounds, like you said, I'd be surprised. So I'm on a tank stoppage inside 6 rounds, and could be a little bit brutal, I think.
Yeah, well, we're all in agreement here. We think Gervonta Davis stoppage lies ahead on March 1st. I would be surprised to see differently, but we've seen all kinds of crazy stuff happen in boxing, so who knows? Anyways, people watching, comment. Let us know what you think is going to happen. Do you think that Lamont Roach has a shot at winning? Let us know down in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, interact with all of our content on all of our platforms. Niall, Danny, as always, thanks very much for chatting with me, and catch you all on the next one.
Thank
Nice
you.
one,
Take care.
lads.
Take care.